Hello, fellow time travelers. Tony Whitt here, just recording this on my headphone mic to save some time. As of this recording, the last episode, Dalek Invasion of Earth, has had a record 229 listens on SoundCloud, which is amazing given that our first episode, An Unearthly Child, has only had 207 listens to date. That 229 listens is since that episode was posted 2 weeks ago. So this is awesome. Thank you so much for listening. If you would like, however, to comment on our podcasts, and I will make reference to this in the podcast itself, we do have a free Target book giveaway. So by all means, please listen to the end of the podcast to find out information about how you could get a free Doctor Who book. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the episode as much as we enjoyed making it. Take care. Hello, fellow time travelers, and welcome back to the Doctor Who Target Book Club, the podcast in which we undertake the humongous task of discussing in story order all of the Doctor Who novelizations. My name is Tony Whitt, and today we have an equally humongous three-person discussion panel, including our so-called expert who's been a Who fan since 1979. That would be me. Yeah, talk about humongous. There's also our intermediate-level casual fan who has seen several episodes but has not previously read any of the books until these podcasts, and this time it's none other than Dalton Hughes. Hello, Dalton.
Yes, it's me. I'm Hughesmongus.
Hughesmongus. Okay, that's good. That's good. We'll leave that in. And finally, we have our novice fan who has seen little to none of the original series and has not previously read any of the books, and this time around it's the wise and wonderful Alison Fitch-Safried. Hello, Alison.
Look, I didn't know I was supposed to prepare material about Howard Hughes or something ahead of time.
This time, we're getting back to the equally wise and wonderful and sadly late Ian Marter, discussing his novelization of the 11th Doctor Who story, The Rescue. Without further ado, here's some fast facts.
Doctor Who, The Rescue, adapted by Ian Marter from the script by David Whittaker that aired from 1/2/65 to 1/9/65, published by Target Books in 1987. As of this recording in June of 2017, this title is currently out of print but is available as an unabridged BBC audiobook, 139 pages.
It's already June.
It's already June, and it kind of feels like it up in my crib today.
Everywhere you go.
Everywhere you go. I'm going to read the back of the book first, and then we will get started with some background material on this puppy. From his one previous visit, the Doctor remembers the inhabitants of the planet Dido as a gentle, peace-loving people. But when he returns, things have changed drastically. It seems that the Didoi have brutally massacred the crew of the crashed spaceliner Astra. Even now, they are threatening the lives of the sole survivors, Bennett, and the orphan girl Vicky. Why have the Didoi apparently turned against their peaceful natures? Can Bennett and Vicky survive until the rescue ship from Earth arrives? And who is the mysterious Coquillion? That's how you pronounce that awful, awful name. And not Cocky-Licken, as Ian actually says in the televised version.
Really?
Yes, that's obviously not in the novelization. No. I'm surprised it isn't, because Ian Marter would have just adored doing something like that.
They tried, but it was...
It was edited out, perhaps.
Yeah, we gotta talk about that. We discussed Ian Marter at some length in episode 8. But just to remind new listeners, Ian Marter was the only actor in the original series of Doctor Who who also did novelizations, and he's second only to Terrance Dicks in the number of novels he did, a mere 9 to Dicks's 64, but still.
Close second.
Close second.
And Alexander Hamilton wrote the rest of them.
Exactly, it feels that way. It seems he did this book right after or during Reign of Terror, since the two books came out in just the same 12-month period. He died in the autumn of 1987, just after completing this manuscript, which may or may not explain some of the oddness of it. Our old friend Nigel Robinson, who commissioned this book from Martyr, added the epilogue, which we really need to talk about now that Allison has just read it and seen what we were talking about. We also need to talk about something else. We need to talk about the fact that Ian Marter believed these books should not be just for kids, or perhaps even for kids at all, if Nigel Robinson is to be believed. And by the way, any of you listening to this with your kids at home, A, cover their ears for a few minutes, and B, shame on you. We're not family friendly. I think we proved that in our last few episodes. We are not family friendly. How dare you? According to Robinson, and I quote, probably the manuscripts which needed the least editing were Ian Marter's. The Rescue, for instance, was left quote-unquote unfinished at the time of his death, but apart from my adding a couple of scenes here and there and tidying up a few lines, there was very little work for me to do on his books. He did have a tendency to see how much he could get away with, however. I cut an entire scene from the first chapter of The Rescue where he was more or less discussing the delights of fellatio. Unquote. So that bit in the prologue that looks like a 69 joke is indeed
I
a 69
wondered about
joke.
that.
Yes, because this book begins with those stellar stirring lines, hear that, Oliphant? 69?
Yeah.
Yeah, that actually is exactly what it appears to be. It is a Beavis and Butthead reference before Beavis and Butthead. I love Ian Marter. I adore Ian Marter, God rest his soul. Needless to say, there's a lot of difference between the book and the televised version, mainly because of two things. One, the original is only 2 parts long.
That's surprising.
Yeah.
It's a 2-parter. And it's specifically written by previous script editor David Whitaker, who is generally capable of much better work, and it was specifically to introduce the new character Vicky, obviously. Interesting that last time Sheena asked whether or not they considered getting an actress who looks similar to Carol Ann Ford to recast Susan. Apparently they did ask Maureen O'Brien, who plays Vicky, if she'd consider cutting her hair short and dyeing it black, to which she replied, why don't you just get Carol Ann Ford back?
Rock on.
Yeah, exactly. She stood up to them.
Well, no one would be happy with that.
No.
With the pale imitation of a previous character.
Yeah, exactly, even though Vicky kind of, well, I don't know. We'll have to talk about that. Because this is a character introduction story, characterization is much more important than anything else in the sliver of a plot that it has.
Yeah.
The original episode has only the TARDIS crew, Vicky, and Bennett. And that's it. The other characters are all Martyr. Yeah.
Very interesting.
And Martyr seems to have a very different take on this story than...
So the other ship, the Seeker, isn't in the episode?
Isn't in the episode
At
at
all?
all. None of that. The prologue does not happen. The epilogue does not happen. And in fact, when we get to those parts, we'll talk about what happens in the televised version that's different. Even the Daidoi. The Daidoi are not called the Daidoi, for one thing.
Okay.
So I guess that's the more proper Latin plural. Or Greek plural. It depends on what... Well, Dido's Latin, isn't it? I don't know.
The only Dido I know is the singer.
The singer, yeah, exactly. And there's only one of her.
Yes.
Yeah.
We'll go down with this shit.
Well, that was the soundtrack to it through the entire thing till we got to Walking on Broken Glass.
Exactly.
Towards the end of the tempo, yes. And that took over in my
yeah.
mental soundtrack.
Let's jump right into the rescue, shall we? Well, what do you want to talk about first? Do you want to talk about the cover? Do you want to talk first impressions? Do you want to talk... Let me pass this around because I do have the original print copy from 1987, which is far more worth the money than Planet of Giants, which came out later and was more expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shorter book, larger print,
Yeah.
more money.
Yeah, and done by Terrence Dicks. Just makes it 10 times worse.
Yeah. I enjoy the depictions of the creatures on the cover.
Coquillion is at the top, and Sandy the sand monster is at the bottom.
Yeah, definitely modeled after whatever actual
Craziness happened.
yeah. It's They're interesting.
Is that how they look on the show, or is that
Yeah, it is.
That's pretty much it.
Yeah, so
Like
even
this,
though...
you can even picture someone being underneath.
And that's exactly what's happening. You've got some poor actor pulling his lower body along with his upper body strength.
Only
It's the
half the
saddest thing. Yeah, exactly. Well, first impressions. Who went first last time? I think it was Dalton, so let's go with Allison this time.
I think he's making that up. I think you somehow wrote me into going first each time. So, well,
I think last
remember,
week Sheena went first.
remember this
Oh,
is
that's true.
the third of these that I have read ever. So I've only read the two that are by Dix, which are pretty spare on the
Yeah.
prose. So this was, in terms of the visual arts, almost Mannerist or Baroque in comparison, if I may be all pretentious for a moment.
Oh, please do.
Which I thought was both the strength and the weakness, because at first I thought this is going to be a long, hard slog. Thought, oh, this is very evocative, but maybe a page and a half wasn't entirely necessary for establishing the scene. But then when you get used to it, yes, it's overwrought, but for crying out loud, it's a TV adaptation, that's okay. It doesn't
Yeah.
have to be Hemingway.
Yeah.
So, the only place that really was a slog, I thought, was in the establishing scenes of, I didn't think it was a problem for the landscape, but in describing the exact relationship of the different ship parts in relation to one another, I thought, okay, is this going to be important later?
Right.
No, it's
no,
not.
it's not.
And then later, towards the end, I found it challenging sometimes to keep up with the elaborate descriptions of the logistics of the ramp. How long is this ramp?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And then towards the middle, when they're going around the sort of creature cave from Return of the Jedi, the moving platform and the teeth
Yes.
and everything.
And that was in the televised version.
It was described in such detail that I had to keep rereading to keep up with what was going on. But those are 3 parts and 130 pages. So
Yeah.
actually, overall, I thought it was quite enjoyably overwrought, over descriptive.
Okay. Now that you know that first part wasn't in the televised version, does it strike you as quite as overwrought now?
No, not the introduction, not the framing device with the seeker, but the first shots of the planet and the wreck.
Oh.
Yeah.
So detailed.
The
Now, I
Astra.
actually liked the
Astra.
framing device
Okay.
and found it very entertaining. It actually reminded me of something from the first episode of 1990 or 91. Serial cartoon that was billed as the American anime Exo Squad.
Oh, Exosquad.
Starts with a really similar
Yes.
scene of a sort of oafish
Yes.
crew of a ship that kind of reminded me a bit about that. It's about it's about the same, written about the same time.
It sure does. And of course...
I liked some details about the 3D crossword puzzle, and I thought it was nice establishing. I thought it was better to start with that establishing scene than go straight into all this detail about the landscape. Otherwise, I might not have made it through.
Yeah, exactly.
So I thought it was smart to put in a framing device.
Terrific. Dalton?
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm feeling like some of it is very much just like so wordy, so chunky, so like, ugh. But I didn't mind any of it. I really I enjoyed a lot of the descriptions. Same thing with you at the end when they're talking about the ramp and the description of that. I was having a lot of trouble visualizing a lot of that. So this is definitely something that I want to go back and see on screen because I get the gist of it, but it's like I want to see what I came up with it in my head versus what is actually depicted on screen.
You may be disappointed.
I mean, I believe it.
We're back to the production in my head is fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. But yeah, I also, for the framing device, I kept wanting them to kind of come back to the crew,
Right.
come back to the rescue ship. Be like,
Yeah.
okay, well, if they say they're going to be here in 3 days, okay, we have 3 days for the Doctor and his companions to do whatever and figure out whatever here, and then something's going to happen. But they never really come back to them until the very end,
Yeah.
and that's where I was just like, but why?
Yeah. And I have a theory about that. I have a theory about why that framing device is there, and it's borne out by, strangely enough, one of the Goodreads reviews had the same theory, and I was like, oh, that makes perfect sense.
Now, they say that I believe that he died soon after finishing this. Was he at the end of an illness where he knew this might be his last project, or is it more sudden?
In fact, as I recall, he was dying of cancer.
Okay.
So he did know that this would be his last project, even though the final end, I believe, was fairly sudden. But yeah, he was pretty much aware. In fact, this book and Reign of Terror constitute what's called Ian Marter's late period, because his early books are the stories that he appeared in.
Yeah.
And they're okay. They're a little... His character's name was Harry, so they're a little Harry-heavy at times. But that's fine, because
and then a very handsome, clever man came in.
Exactly.
And Harry saved everyone.
So there's
Not
that.
quite how you remember it.
But then the middle books are the ones that he didn't appear in, and those are considered by fans to be not quite as good. And then these two are considered the cream of the crop. Yeah. Especially this one. Though, having reread this one now, well, we've got to talk about that. We really do.
Well, I started with somewhat of a negative description because that was a first impression, but this is by far my favorite of the three that I've read.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
She doesn't like the dicks.
Well, no, I liked them fine.
She does.
Remember, they were both much better than I expected, but I had really low expectations coming in. And,
Oh, that's true. That's true, especially with Planet of Giant Dicks.
yes.
Yeah.
One's expectations are great, it's true.
Oh, yeah. That is a sex joke at the beginning. And I can't get around that. I mean, even though it is Ian Marter, I have trouble. In fact, that kind of almost ruined the prologue for me this time.
But it's appropriately done where, like, if you were a child reading this and you didn't get the reference, you would run right over it, which is the best kind of all ages, slightly dirty joke.
Oh, okay.
Where,
That's kind of what I got out
Chris
of it.
Claremont's infamous for this.
Oh,
Like
yeah,
his 80s
from
comics
X-Men,
where
yeah.
you would not notice all the phallic imagery necessarily, of course, from the artist, but some of the rather lurid references that are in there as a child, and years later you reread it, like, wow, this is actually kind of pleasantly dirty. So I didn't have a problem with it for that reason.
that line, I actually, like, I went back and reread it, and I was like, was that intentional? Was that... It could be, but it also was kind of just, like, brushed off in a way.
Yeah.
So it's like, all right, I'm an adult. I'll take it as that. But it could also just be what it is.
Yeah,
So
but we also get some swearing in that prologue, too, which surprised me quite a bit. And I'm trying to remember, it's in my notes, but now I can't remember exactly where the swearing came. It's probably damn it.
Shall we find it and read it on air?
Sure. That would be useful. I'm almost certain it's a character saying damn it or god damn it, because that's what usually stands out to me. If only because... Still, in 1987, these were considered children's books.
Yeah.
Hell.
As I was going to say, I
Hell.
saw the hell, but I'm looking for something worse than hell.
He unzipped a pocket on his tunic and took out a fresh sachet of gum, so...
So at least there's that.
So far, all ages.
I'm wondering if it was the hell, though I have some trouble thinking that would have been enough for me to have put it in my notes.
Well, seems one hell of a way to come just to salvage a couple of immigrants.
Yeah.
Even if one of them is a dame. So you got a little
It's a
misogyny there,
dame.
too. So.
It's like all of a sudden we're in Guys and Dolls.
So about how old is the actress who is Vicky? She a teen?
You would ask me that.
Well, I visualized her being more like 10 or 12.
She's not. She's not. If memory serves, she's the same age as Carol Ann Ford, or roughly, so she's mid-20s. The character is supposed to be younger. So the character is obviously supposed to be like 15,
A teen,
16.
not child.
A
Okay.
teen.
See, I wasn't getting that at all.
Really?
I was not getting that she was that young.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I was just getting that, of course, she was stuck here on this planet, stranded, and kind of just being taken advantage of.
Oh, okay. And that would be more in keeping with the way Maureen O'Brien actually plays the character.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's probably what Ian Marter was getting out of it, too, because, yeah, we need to talk about that weird relationship she has with Bennett and the whole Coquillian thing. Because, Lord.
I mean, I knew something was up from the second. I don't remember what page it was on, what chapter, but they have an interaction, and then he describes the way that Bennett has this look on his face that she doesn't see.
And the Spanish beard, which clearly is a sign of trickery or
yes.
something.
Yes.
Yes.
It's sinister, but yeah, that being put there, it's like, all right, this is like the first or second chapter, and you're already telling me this guy is not good.
Yeah. Yeah, and he plays it even more broadly in the televised version, so I'm sure Marter is giving us that little bit of foreshadowing, which we don't really need, because as murder mysteries go, there's not much of a mystery, except for what happened to the Didoy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's at least that.
Well, and it's one of these things that we keep running into of what is the actual danger? We have a feeling of danger. We have an explanation that there is danger, but we don't actually see the danger.
No.
It's
I
not
thought the danger that was that Coquillian would decide to kill them.
Yeah.
that. But other than that, like you see him one or two times, but other than that, they're worried about these other creatures, and it's like. They're not here. We don't see them.
Exactly.
What are you so worried about?
And in fact, the only way Vicky knows they're a threat is what Bennett tells her.
Exactly.
So she's got this sort of weird, not quite Stockholm Syndrome going on. It's not quite that developed.
That's the reason I
it's a
visualized
trust.
her as younger, though, because she was so easily manipulated.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
She's emotionally intelligent to not like him and not trust him.
Right.
But it's not very hard for him to get her to conform.
Yeah.
Either.
And I think he does describe her as, I have it in my notes that he describes her as the correct age for the character. So that must have been where you were getting the fact that she was
talks
really
about
young.
her looking like Joan of Arc, which I should have visualized, more of a teen then rather than a child.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that is the case because definitely she's older than her character by that point. The TARDIS. We should just jump right into that fan theory about what's going on in the book. Because nothing approaching it happens in the televised version.
I thought the TARDIS was throwing off the navigational systems that was responsible for all the interference in the opening and ending framing sequence.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the larger fan theory, as one of the reviewers pointed out, is that he thinks, because of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff, the TARDIS actually caused the Astra to crash. So there's a bit of, what would you say, predestination going on there, that Vicky was
that makes
always
sense.
meant to
I thought it
end
was
up
going
on
to be
TARDIS.
actually more
Self-fulfilling
explicitly
prophecy.
followed
Yeah.
up at the end.
Yeah, and I think that might actually be what's happening. Because that would explain why the rescue ship takes so long to get there, because it's basically collided with the TARDIS twice.
Yeah.
I actually thought that the rescue ship was going to turn out to be moving at a different pace through time than the planet. The planet was going to actually be on a different timeline. So they thought the ship was 3 days away or 60 hours away, but actually be years away.
Oh.
But I was wrong.
So
That
there
did
would have
not
been
turn out to be
some
the case.
relativistic thing going on like
But
that.
possibly caused by the TARDIS rather than by gravity.
Oh, that's an idea. Or it would have been like that Star Trek Voyager episode Wink of an Eye, where they're passing through the planet's atmosphere and centuries are going by below.
Or
it only
Interstellar,
minutes.
we're on the high gravity planet.
Oh,
It's,
yeah.
a few hours to them on the planet, but it's 20 years on the ship. But that fan theory was wrong.
Well, Martyr could have done that. Though it's interesting enough that he did this, because, it kind of makes everything that happens with the TARDIS crew not nearly as innocent as it was before. Because the Doctor, even though he's never going to know this, bears some responsibility for the Vicky's father dying and all of that.
Well, the whole Didoy race being
Yes.
destroyed.
Yeah.
Yes, the remainder of the Didoy. In fact, let's talk about... I know we're putting the cart before the horse, but I don't care. Let's go straight to the epilogue.
Consequences be damned.
Yes.
But family-friendly language.
Exactly. The epilogue is not written by Ian Martyr.
Oh.
That is Robinson. That sliver of an epilogue in which the Didoy are killed.
That complete bummer that Dalton had to explain to me.
Yes, 2 sentient anthropoid beings located in the vicinity of wreck, believed to be male and female, both killed during encounter with support group personnel before any contact established, so they shot first. No evidence of any other intelligent life. Return visit believed unproductive. Quit Dido, orbital terrestrial year 11225 Happy Christmas, peace on earth, goodwill to all persons. Which is just like... It's like a knife in your back at the very end of it.
Goodwill to all persons, which in my PDF copy is on its own page. Goodwill to all persons is on its own
Take that.
page.
It says at
Oh,
the end.
wow. Which is
Yeah.
even more impressive, really.
It ends peace on earth, flip the page, goodwill to all persons.
Morbid
so that's
typesetter.
that's like a
Yes.
knife in the back.
It
That's not,
really
that's not in
is.
the stomach in a twist. That's in the back. That's by the way.
Yeah, and granted, Ian Marter has a reputation for that, because most of what Robinson ever had to do to his manuscripts was cut out the blood and guts.
Yeah.
He tended to make the stories a lot gorier. I mean, with Reign of Terror, he still did it. We got nasty things like,
was done well, but-
Robespierre being shot in the
Yeah.
jaw, for instance.
Yeah, there were a lot of good details in there.
Oh, God, were there ever. And yet they kind of had to be there. But that ending is just so nihilistic. It's like, oh my Lord God. But here's the question, does it add to the book for you? Does it ruin the book for you? Does it work with what you saw up to that point?
I think it definitely brought like I don't know, a humanistic aspect to it that like wasn't really there.
How so?
Well, just like it feeling like it kind of it doesn't really explain why they do it, but not even humanistic. It shows how fucked up humans can be, and how we will excuse some of our actions as virtuous,
Right.
even when they're not.
Right.
And I remember there was a portion in there where they're talking about global warming on Dido, and relating that back to Earth. And I've talked about how some of the other books have been very prescient to current events.
Well, part of that is because this is late 80s, so the authors are sticking that in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it definitely took an interesting turn at the end.
I mean, it does. It's arguably a harsh device to show that the Doctor was right all the time. They are extremely kind and hospitable. They came out of hiding to help these strangers, and then they were presumably trying to greet the new ship, and that's what got them killed.
Yeah. And that's
So
what
the
kinda
Doctor
gets
was
me.
right about their fundamentally kind and hospitable character.
Right.
Yeah.
What happens in the televised version is slightly different. For one thing, the Didoans as they're called in the televised version, are humanoid. It's two males, by the way. So it's like, oh, the final survivors are male, and there's a same-sex relationship there. Woo! And they're both cute. I like them. But, I mean, 1964 cute, but still, that's pretty damn cute. Yeah. And they do the whole thing with confronting Bennett in the cave. They also, at the very end, after the TARDIS has left, they go into the Astra and they smash everything. They smash the radio and they smash the ship, so that it appears that there was never any evidence of any survivors ever, but that's the last we ever see of them. So the rescue ship has no reason really to land anymore. So I've wondered why it is that he changed them so fundamentally, because the Didoi are so, that's probably why the name's different. The Didoi are so completely different from the televised version's Didoans that they are a different race. They're completely alien. I was wondering what you thought of that change.
Didn't see the original episode, so I wasn't thinking of it as a change.
Okay. Well, now that you're aware of it.
Do you think they were more hostile in the original?
No, but they do smash the equipment, and they smash any evidence that anyone was ever really there, which would probably lead Earth to think, oh, well, the natives are hostile if they still exist, which would lead to the destruction of them if they ever were caught. But changing them from humanoid, and changing them and tacking on that ending.
In the episode, does the Doctor talk about how shocked he is that they would kill everyone, because when he had met them before, they were very kind and gregarious?
He does. He does. Yeah, that previous visit is still there.
I don't have strong feelings.
Okay.
They're not shown to have a lot of personality. I don't recall if they speak at all or communicate at all, or just act.
No, they're pretty much just described. There's not a whole lot of action that they do themselves. It's all a lot of the Doctor describing what he experienced with them.
But they do kill someone, and that was a little unexpected.
They do.
Based on how the Doctor described them.
But it's Bennett.
Yes.
Yeah, and he had it coming.
But you could infer from the Doctor's description that they were absolutely nonviolent, and they were apparently just usually nonviolent.
Yeah, though I have a feeling that having most of their race wiped out by him, and then...
Yeah.
Oh, that's the other big change. The other big change is, and this is something I'm really just impressed with Marder's job on this, that in the televised version there's no reference to the planet being in decline. There's no reference to that weird sort of orbit it has that causes it to go into
I thought it was really
decline.
interesting.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fascinating. Yeah. And there's no reference to them being such a small race. So you were saying that you found that fascinating?
Well, yeah, just the concept of, I mean, I don't think that's how gravity works. Well, the figure 8 orbit, but that they have essentially an orbit that takes centuries, and that they know that there are centuries of parched, harsh drought conditions coming. And how would you know, is there any such thing as enough foreknowledge to plan for that? And I thought it was an interesting idea of planning over multiple generations for something that is centuries long but will terminate. And so it was an interesting concept, that their population expands and dwindles, but they know it's going to happen and can plan for it.
Yeah.
Only this time, that's why I found it kind of hollow at the end. This time they didn't make it, because obviously they're used to making it through worse things than hostile outsiders. They're used to making it through the harshest of conditions and live on a planet full of hungry creatures. In fact, in the very mountain with hungry creatures who would like to eat them. So, on the one hand, I know it's supposed to be a downbeat ending, but I thought that the discovery of the ruins of the mountain indicated there are probably some more of them somewhere surviving on the planet.
That's what I was thinking too. Especially in the televised version, you get the impression that there can't just be 2 left. But this book almost makes it seem as if those are the last.
It seems that bleak. It seems...
Well, especially pointing out it's a male and a female, so...
Right.
Yeah.
The last breeding pair.
Yeah, Adam and Eve are gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All bets are off.
Yeah. It's a bit of a creepy book if you think about it too closely. I mean, even his description of Coquillian is just like, ooh. Yeah.
But that just sounded like some of the other creatures on the planet to me. So it's like, all right, here's this
here's
creature.
a giant biting fly.
Right, here's
who
this
comes in and gives them the business.
Here's this creature from the planet that is higher intelligence and is not a pet and not wild, but has some kind of like cognitive awareness. So it's like, all right, I didn't immediately put together that was Bennett, but I had suspicions.
Okay. Well, did you think it was Bennett?
Once again, I don't try to figure it out, so if I do, it's really badly written. So, no, obviously there's something up with Bennett, but I didn't try to guess what specific thing.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I didn't think it was going to turn out to be the village, but obviously it was. The village on Tatooine, I guess. Crappy desert planet. But I'm one of the very few people who actually liked the village, though. It's for different reasons. My main problem with Bennett, and perhaps I've missed something obvious here, is understand why he killed the rest of the crew of the ship. He killed everyone who knew that he had been arrested, but it hadn't been put out on Interpol or Intergalax. Why did he need to try to kill Ian and Barbara? Because they would also have not known that he had been arrested for murder. Just kind of like the crew of the Seeker wouldn't have known. It wasn't clear to me why he immediately tried to kill them.
That's a good question. Dalton, what do you think?
I just think he's just a bad egg. I just think, I mean, you've already killed everyone on your ship. The majority of this
But they could have been a ride out of there.
Yeah.
It just seemed...
But that's a ride out of there, and you kill them, you steal their ship, and then no one knows.
True.
You got a clean getaway. You don't have to worry about anyone following you. You don't have to worry about someone chasing you down, arresting you again.
But he created a collapse to trap their ship inside. I thought it was at odds with the image of him being quite clever and the master of the situation, just have him try to kill a couple of people without even trying to manipulate them or get their ship first.
Yeah, I'm wondering if it's a lack of forethought on his part, that he thinks maybe if I do kill these guys, I can take their ship, and Vicky will think that, I found this ship. It's in the cave.
But also, like, at that point, weren't they aware that the rescue ship was coming?
They were.
So then it's the rescue ship is coming. There are people on the planet that weren't here with us, that are not part of our crew, that will be like, okay, well, where's the rest of your crew at?
Right.
If the rescue ship comes and starts questioning, then there are multiple people there that are bystanders that are like, we don't know what's going on. We got here and this is what happened.
Oh.
That raises more questions.
That could be it.
And so it's like you get rid of anyone that could cause someone to question.
Right. So
Because at this point, Bennett and Vicky are the only two, and Vicky is pretty much hook, line, and sinker, bought everything Bennett has told her.
Okay, so you think he's thought it through that far?
I don't know if he's necessarily thought it through, but it definitely makes more sense as someone who's already killed a whole race of people and everyone that was on his ship to just be like, you are just disposable.
Yeah, true.
So it's not necessarily thought out, but it's definitely, that's his mode of operation. So
Yeah.
he's already out for blood. So
Exactly.
what's a couple more bodies?
Yeah. And I think the fact that we're able to attribute that motivation to him speaks more to Ian Marter's characterization than it does to the original script. Because in the original script, it's just, oh, we need 2 episodes. We need to put these people in danger.
Right.
So we're going to push Barbara down a honking big cliff. And
Right.
somehow she survives because she's Babs. And
Tough as
Ian,
nails.
and Ian gets into this weird kind of extended Raiders of the Lost Ark situation with the Doctor.
I really like the imagery of the temple/museum and the idea that the native religion had violent imagery, but not actual violence in some ways.
Oh.
Like they have this costume of the giant biting fly. It's not actually what it's called, but they have this costume. They talk about having only ceremonial use, and then Bennett comes in and actually makes it a device of violence.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thus creating what it was never really intended to be.
Sort of bringing his own personality and moral perspective to
yeah.
it, introducing violence into either what was never a violent religion or only memorializes certain aspects of it in the same way that, modern Christian Jewish congregations do not actually usually try to reenact the Book of Judges, just talk about it
Yeah,
in some ways.
exactly.
But he comes in and he immediately sees violence in what are used as religious artifacts that are kept in a museum and actually uses them for actual violence.
He
tries to
embodies
kill
it.
the doctor while wearing it.
He embodies it instead of it being something that is intellectual, something to think about, something to ponder upon.
It's not symbolism, it's actual.
Yeah.
It is
fact.
actual.
Yeah.
Yeah, he has become.
Yeah. So it's not transubstantiation anymore. It's actually it would be literal
He
transubstantiation.
would like some actual body and blood.
Blood of Christ,
so-
dude. Here we go.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, and again, that's more than what's in the 2-parter. I mean, we're looking at 50 minutes of screen time, if that, just to bring us Vicky. And of course, we will talk about Vicky quite soon. But we also have to talk about our regulars, because this is the first time we've seen them since Susan finally left. Yes, I'm so happy at that. Oh, and that spiked badly. Let me try it again. There we go. That's a little softer. This is the first time we've seen them since Susan left. How do you think Martyr is rendering them as opposed to Dix?
I like how he describes the doctors obviously being upset and trying not to display it about Susan being gone and them being annoyed at his repression and finding him more dickish than ever. I thought it was nice early characterizations. It's almost too much conflict. I mean, it seems like Dix and Martyr are both so committed to the Doctor as magnificent bastard that he's really hard to identify with sometimes. Right. And like I said, that's the characterization. But
yeah, and that's the thing.
It's played really hard.
I think that's the key thing. You put your finger right on it, that in those early episodes, the Doctor was never the identification character. It was always the companions. And in the new series, that's been looked at in askance sometimes, and they say, oh, for instance, when they introduced it in 2005, Rose is the main character, not the Doctor. And it's like, well, of course she is.
Yeah. Well, I'm sitting here drinking out of the Batman mug. You're not supposed to relate to Batman.
No.
Anyone who writes Batman as your relatable character is doing it wrong.
Exactly.
So,
exactly.
I'm okay with the Doctor being that crotchety, but it's almost overdone to at one point he, it was funny that he was more concerned about his coat being ripped than Ian almost dying. But,
Yes.
but you do actually wonder at times, okay, is the doctor actually good? Is he really that cold-blooded or not? This is someone with very limited perspective.
I'm trying
This doctor right here, just these 3 books.
Sometimes
not
I
the
feel like
episodes.
he gets some glee out of watching people squirm.
He really does.
He knows things are going to be okay. He's got it figured out, and he just likes to see people squirm.
That I got before. This was the first time I thought he might, it's presented with his internal thoughts, he might not actually care that much if Ian dies horribly. That might just be, a fly smacked or something. He might be cool with that. And that was a lot different than he likes to make Ian squirm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I can
Maybe
see
not that much different. A little different.
Well, the interesting thing...
Maybe he's not just messing with people. Maybe he is that guy.
I think he might be that guy.
Yeah.
The next book is going to portray him very much as that guy, and out of his own mouth, because it's an epistolary novel. So we get to hear the doctor's journal. And yeah, I think you may be onto something there. I think that's part of the thing that people have trouble with Capaldi's Doctor. The Capaldi's Doctor is not likable. This season he's been a little better about that, but he's generally not likable. It's like, who said the Doctor ever had to be likable?
They got spoiled. They got spoiled by David Tennant and Matt Smith.
Yes.
They got spoiled.
The weirdness of hot, young, sexy doctor, which is
Yes.
the anomaly. Not
Yes,
the usual.
even Eccleston
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
comparatively a hot,
three
young,
hot,
sexy
young,
doctor.
sexy doctors
For that
already.
matter, Peter Davison is a hot, young, sexy doctor, and he's probably the most likable doctor, and some would say that makes him the most ineffective. I am not one of those people, by the way.
I am such not a person of the fandom that I visualize Pete Davidson from Saturday Night Live. I'm like, wait a minute, he was never the doctor. He's like 22 years old.
No, not Pete Davison. God, no. That's right. We
No, I
haven't
kind
even
of want to
watched...
see that.
No, that would be
Pete
interesting.
Davidson is the doctor.
I'm battling my addictions and aliens. Yeah, I could just see
It
that
would be a very
too.
dickish doctor.
He would be. He absolutely would be. Babs. How does Babs come across to you? Because Dalton and I are very big fans of Babs.
It's like she's almost there, but it's like not quite the Babs that we've had in the past.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Well, here's the question. You've read Reign of Terror. Is she the Babs that was in Reign of Terror?
I don't think she has as much spunk. I don't feel like she has as much of that like tenacity.
Yeah.
It seems to be a little like
Even when she's reading Ian the Riot Act for saying, God, what is it that he says to them? Something about you girls or all this with Ian and the girls. It's in chapter 10. Yeah, saying that that he's got the girls in tow with you two in tow, and she's like, in
Oh,
tow?
really? The girl's in tow.
Tow.
Eh?
no. She
Ian
has,
Chesterton.
she has moments where she like peeks up at there, but I feel like there's not a ton going on here, and like you said, this is a story to introduce Vicky.
Yes.
All the characterization goes to Vicky.
Yeah. And so
Which is fine.
a lot of what normally would be focused on with Barbara and Ian, they have their moments here and there. They have their pithy comebacks and stuff. But overall, it's not so much focused on them.
Well, the reason I bring that up is because they have a lot more to do in the book than they do the televised version. Chapter 10, for instance, occurs in no way in the televised version. Chapter 10 is all new material, so when Barbara's saying, what do you mean, us two in tow? Just you wait, Ian Chesterton. We girls aren't so useless as you boys like to think. That is all new material. And personally, I think it's good characterization material, and she does come across as a lot spunkier, but I was thinking more of how Vicky reacts to her killing Sandy.
Oh, yeah.
It very easily could have gone much more to the perspective of Vicky, and it goes entirely to the perspective of Barbara.
Okay, in what sense?
Well, instead of it going to the perspective of Vicky as the mean lady has come in and killed my pet, I think Barbara is shown as the most consistently level-headed person most consistently sensible person in the entire book. Yeah. Mm-hmm. She's not characterized in a very interesting way in terms of persona.
Right.
And once again, I'm not seeing the performance here, just looking at how it's read, but
Right.
Yeah.
she keeps her head together more than the Doctor does in some ways.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, she's the one who, when she sees this creature bearing down on Vicky, she's like, she's not going to hear me. I'm going to have to shoot this gun that I don't know how to shoot. And the end's going to fall off. That's in the televised version. It's a blooper they left in. The thing fell apart with her hands. It's so brilliant.
One-time use.
Like I said, from the first introduction in Planet of Giant Dicks, I don't remember the correct name of that book anymore. I'm like, I think, oh gosh, it's going to be the old, the school marm, the shrew, the killjoy is here just to offset the fun of the boys and the younger girl.
Right.
And it doesn't materialize in a way that's a continual relief. And it just as easily could have gone in the direction of everyone agreeing with Vicky that she was awful to kill this obviously fun creature. And the Doctor says, no, I would have done exactly the same thing. That was actually quietly very nice that the Doctor backed her up.
Yes, and that's expanded from the televised version too. Because he has that same sort of talk with her, but it's more about how Barbara's really a good person and was looking out for her, but his line about, I would have done the same thing, is slightly different.
Not just she means well, but she's an idiot, but she means well, and that's what anyone would have done in that situation. She was wrong, but how could she have possibly known is actually quietly important.
Yeah.
Instead of showing her to be the heavy who is usually wrong about that.
Yeah,
so.
exactly.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong about Barbara. I feel like she's still there, but as far as like other books we've read where she had a lot more to do, there's not so much that going on here.
Yeah.
So that's what I really mean. Clearly, she's still spunky, she's still mouthy, she's still cerebral and thinking about things before doing them. Mm-hmm. But yeah, there's not a whole lot of action going on. There's not really a place for her to be like, here's me helping us achieve our goal.
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot of that.
No, that's true. That's
the kind of stuff like I'm missing is like Barbara in Reign of Terror, who's like outsmarting all these French guards and helping get everyone back together.
Though I've noticed that she quickly sizes up the situation between Vicky and Bennett, even though she's concussed and bruised. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, that's very Barbara. It's like, I've got the dizzies, but I know what's going on here. That's extremely Barbara. That's like Barbara in the Sensorites. She's gone from the story for 2 episodes, but as soon as they bring her down to the planet, she's like, oh, that's what's happening, is it? Yeah. Okay, this is what we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I could see where compared to that story, this story is probably slightly more less.
Yeah, and like we said, it's this one is mainly a vehicle to introduce Vicky. This one is mainly, yes, there's characterization. Yes, we do kind of like see the dynamics of the team without Susan there, which is, that dynamic is completely different because now the Doctor's has to rely on Barbara and Ian more, but also now there's a new person too. So how's that going to play out?
A new player has added.
Yes. Granddaughter was not in quotes.
No,
just the Doctor's granddaughter, and I think it's the narrator's voice rather than one of the characters.
It is, and you're right. Ian Marter is very much seems to be in the camp that the Doctor's granddaughter actually is Susan, because, like we said, with Reign of Terror, it's the problem there is the quotes are not around granddaughter; the quotes are around her friends. So he doesn't accept Ian and Barbara as friends yet. And in this book, you're right, he is much more dickish. And Martyr makes him even more dickish because I have a line, which is one of my favorites, in chapter 5, where the Doctor's trying to tell Ian to go over around the blades.
Yeah.
And Ian says, but these are razor-sharp blades, Doctor. And the Doctor says, dear me, so they are. How very inconvenient for you. Well, it's no good trying to climb over them. And you're like, you son of a bitch.
Sucks to be you.
Yeah, basically. And that's much more, he does much more of that in the written version than he does in the televised.
And I guess I should have thought during that scene, well, it's still in the context of he is still pretending to not be upset about Susan, and of course he is. They do bring that up at the beginning, that he is upset about Susan, he mentions her, but then he pretends that he's not thinking about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I guess that does give more context rather than him just being an ass.
Yeah, exactly. He's much more than an ass, even at his best.
Actually, now that I think of it, it's kind of a nice dark undertone that compared to Susan, what's losing Ian going to be?
Yeah.
Nothing compared to losing Susan. I know Susan didn't
That's
die,
true.
but maybe he's, having second thoughts about blessing that.
Since he was considering putting Ian and Barbara out of the TARDIS ages ago. Yeah. I mean, they're much more friendly now than they ever were.
Is he supposedly trying to help them get home, or is they're not even a pretense to that?
Well...
They make it seem like he's supposed to be trying to get them home, but every attempt he makes to get them
he's
home...
not trying very hard.
Yeah.
Well, they kind of make it seem like the Doctor doesn't quite understand the TARDIS yet, so he doesn't even quite know how to control it. So they are... He's trying things out to get them back, and he's gotten the space right, but not the time right.
Yes.
He's gotten the time right, but there's been other stuff going on.
Exactly. And the next book is going to establish that he thinks he's doing them a favor by keeping them out in time and space rather than taking them home.
I mean...
Oh, what's the bit about the Coal Hill School being replaced by a municipal dump or something?
Oh, yeah,
I
I saw
love
that.
that in
I
Chapter
love
8.
Is that just a throwaway gag?
That
or is
line
that...
about the current fate of the Coal Hill School is just lovely. It adds nothing to the plot, but it wasn't in the
I think
televised
that's a
version.
standalone gag. I actually really like that.
Yeah, it's just a
It's gone
funny
anyway.
line.
Yeah, and that's exactly what Martyr is doing. It's just the throwaway lines like that are just luscious.
A lot more fun than Dick's.
Yeah. Is it?
Martyrdom is much more fun than Dick's, depending on the quality of Dick's and the mode of martyrdom, I suppose.
Oh my god, I'm gonna have to change the levels.
Well,
on
before
that
you
one.
were talking last week about next week we're going to read a book about Martyr, and I was imagining like Justin Martyr, like Martyr, and of course Justin Martyr wasn't called that while he was still alive. It was after he died. I'm like, so
No.
Ian Martyr, was he killed for writing the Doctor? Yeah. Different spelling, different name.
Nah, he was martyred for other reasons. But yeah, he's definitely a much more fun writer. And I mean, the bit about global warming, updating the recording stuff to a Laserdisc recorder. It's like, oh, how quaint.
Yes.
Yeah, it's 1987, but still, it's better than what you see on screen, which is a tape-to-tape recorder.
Yeah.
Tape-to-tape, reel-to-reel tape recorder.
I just started watching Legion. I'm so excited. Speaking of reel-to-reel tape recorders.
What
Sorry,
does
that was
have to do
apropos
with
of nothing.
Legion?
There's a scene when he's talking to an interviewer who's using reel-to-reel tape to record their
really?
conversation.
Is
So,
it in period, or is it just some peccadillo of this guy?
I haven't started watching this yet.
No.
I don't even know you anymore. It's set in the current time, but there are a lot of 60s aesthetic affectations.
Oh,
and that's one of them.
wow.
So I'm sorry, I just
Okay.
started a different 4-hour conversation.
Okay.
It just didn't occur to me that you hadn't been watching it.
No, not yet. Not yet, but I will if ever I
Oh.
get the time. Yeah.
I might have to. Yeah, I might
Yeah.
have to take you through it. Not take you
Yes.
through it. Not that you can't watch it on your own, but
I'm
I
willing
could
to
not
be
have
taken
believed
through.
it could be that good. I thought people were
Okay.
just watching it with some really good weed and enjoying it beyond what it deserved. But
Is that
it
the
is that
series
good.
that David Selby is in?
I don't know who that is. I wouldn't
Okay,
know.
David Selby is from Dark Shadows. He was also on Knots Land. I think it was Knots Landing. He was on some. Anyway, we're going far afield.
Yes, and I apologize, and I did that. But
That's fine, but
no, I'm just.
no,
that was an
that's-
example of. It's a program where they use antiquated technology sometimes, just sort of an
Yes.
aesthetic.
And in 1964, it would not have been antiquated for 1964. It would have been antiquated for the frickin' Astra.
But even 80s and 90s movies, you still see the actual reel-to-reel is almost... I don't remember this vocabulary word from high school, but what's the word that... It's not icon, it's something like... an antiquated image that stands in for a device that's since moved on, like the image of the wall-mounted telephone to stand for a telephone,
yes,
or the phonograph to stand for
It's
any
either
kind of...
metonymy or synecdoche. I can't remember which.
No, it's not one of those. It's something
Those are the poetic terms.
even fancier than that.
Even fancier than that?
Yeah, like especially like an icon on your phone of a rotary phone for the phone app.
Yes.
That word.
Yes, that came up recently while Danny and I were watching some YouTube videos, and they were saying this is this, such as this and this and this, and I was like, they were right about the other examples. They were wrong about the one they made the damn video about.
All right.
Yeah, the
So
terms
sometimes
are.
the reel-to-reel recorder can be used as just a symbol of
Right.
recording,
Symbol
even
of
though
recording.
we've long
Yeah,
since
though on
surpassed
print it would have to be Laserdisc recorder.
Yeah.
I'm sure someone will write us in. I'm hoping to God that someone will write in and tell us how wrong we were, because it would mean that we have listeners who are responding. And those respondents could get a free book, which I still have to give to them. But more details about that later.
I still expect someone to write an angry comment about the fact that I said that Frank Miller was in some way involved with the crappy electronically produced Iron Man comic
And
from
no,
around
I
the
did.
time and say, who's the fake girl nerd? But that hasn't materialized
No,
quite yet.
we
But there
haven't
is
even
still
gotten-
time before the heat death of the universe for that to happen.
We haven't even gotten nasty comments. It's ridiculous.
Tony, what are you doing wrong?
I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but here's the thing, though.
You have to have more controversy.
Well, I meant to bring this up.
Talk about Mike Pence and bring the NSA into it.
Well, here's the amazing thing. Our last episode got, as of tonight, 209 listens.
Really?
Yeah, which is more than
Well,
the
we
first
have
episode
got
got.
to get Dalton hammered more frequently.
I think so, too. Or I need
told
to
you guys.
record things
I was
badly.
sitting right next to him. I had no idea that that was happening. He was the very soul of
Oh,
discretion.
I believe so, too. I think so, too. It was only because I was listening to him blaring in my ear as I was editing
He was
the...
completely decorous the entire
he
time.
was, indeed. I think it was because it was a Daleks episode.
Okay.
I think that was it.
That has a chemical effect on you?
No, Dalton. I mean, I think that's why we got so many listeners.
Oh, fair enough. like,
Because people are
I
like,
will
"Oh,
take all of the credit. for that.
Nah, can't do it this
just
time.
all
sorry.
Dalton stalkers who wanted to hear
This
him
time,
slightly compromised.
This time it's all going to be about Vicky, and, well, we have to talk about Vicky.
First impression, I liked how the character was presented, but she was a little too stupid.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not terribly stupid,
Mm-hmm.
but a little too stupid. But maybe, once again, I don't know where the stories go from here. Maybe it's appropriate that they start her off a little too naive so that she can develop from there.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, I was getting like naive Susan vibes from her,
Mm-hmm.
but a lot of that, like we said earlier, was kind of like Stockholm Syndrome. It's very much like she has been taken advantage of the whole time she's been here, and very much like her perspective has been formed for her.
Right.
So she hasn't really had a chance to come up with anything for herself.
But they do start with the promise, or this book, and I don't know if this is in the episode
Yeah.
or not, but it does start with the promising premise that Bennett has fundamentally misunderestimated her. Oh, there's this little girl. She's
Yeah.
never going to figure any of this
Yeah.
out. And of course, she's not the one who ultimately figures out that he's wearing the costume. That's the doctor. But he has underestimated her as this stupid little girl. And that's a good seed to start from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so, too. Yeah, she's definitely never going to be Susan, which is kind of a good thing.
Yeah.
But she also is her own character, and I'm not giving anything away with her character arc, but where she ends up is, at the same time, very similar to Susan, but quite different. You would not think that this character would end up where she ends up. But
Good. Do something different.
yeah, I think it's just absolutely interesting where she does end up going. But good. You felt the same way about her?
Yeah,
Dalton?
yeah, just kind of like, all right, she's young, she's kind of naive, there's not a whole lot going on with her yet, but potential is there.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate that we're doing these in story order for this time, because you're not going to see a lot of Vicky in the next book, simply because it is an epistolary novel, so it's going to be told from various people's point of view. Vicky's not one of them. She doesn't keep a journal, so we're not gonna hear from her, unfortunately. But we'll hear from other people about her, and one of them's the doctor, so that's the important thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. What else? How much of an 80s book is this?
Care to expound on that
I
query?
will. I will. There are references to Reganium, named after Reagan.
Yeah.
Ew,
that.
that
I
went
saw that.
totally over my head.
I saw that, yeah.
There's a reference to a planet called Geldof 8, Bob Geldof
Bob Geldof.
was the famous organizer of Live Aid.
Yep.
Dude, I was born in 79.
I know.
I
but
can't be expected
you
to
were
keep
still a
up
tiny little
with stage managers from
toddler.
concerts in the 80s.
I was born in 85, so...
Yeah, but he would have been the organizer of, you know...
Way to shame me. Thanks,
Yeah.
Obama.
Yeah. Thanks. I'm just a big music nerd, so of course I know.
Yeah,
Bob
so
Geldof.
there's Geldof, there's Reganium. There's also a Star Wars reference in Chapter
Yes.
15. You
Yes,
caught that?
I saw that, and I was like, but... I was confused for a second, because, like, but this aired in the 60s, and it's like, the book came out in the 80s. Okay,
Yeah.
don't break your brain. Also, these Earth people are from the 25th century, 26th century.
exactly.
So, all right.
So Star Wars
What if-
exists as a fictional
Classic
construct in the
literature,
universe.
classic film.
Classic film.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
And weirdly enough, there is a reference to blinding you with science.
I did miss that one.
Yeah, that is in Chapter 11.
I was just focusing on walking on broken glass.
And
Well, there was
it's
that, too.
it's
That
the
was-
doctor that says it, which makes it even funnier.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can find it.
I don't remember the line, but I do remember it coming up and being like,
Yeah, Thomas Dolby reference.
yes.
It's like, oh my god, that is brilliant. Just so our listeners at home know that we caught this, or that I caught this because supposedly expert over here, hello. That business with the Bennett oscillator isn't in the script, and it sounds so much like something the Tom Baker Doctor would have come up with that it makes you wonder if Martyr forgot which Doctor he was writing.
Which bit are you talking about?
The Bennett oscillator.
Yeah.
Oh, are you related to the famous scientist?
Who
Bennett?
created
Gotcha.
the Bennett oscillator, because the Bennett oscillator is something that comes up in the Tom Baker era. It's on page, well, I know our pages are different. Page 111 in Chapter 11.
It's 109.
It's 109 for the and the. Yeah. It works, he cried. Or rather, it will when it has been invented. On the principle of photon inertia using a small array of multiply vectored lasers, he babbled on, backing away toward the huge pillars leading to the entrance. I do hope I'm not blinding you with science, Mr. Bennett. Yeah, Thomas Dolby reference. Hardcore.
That's like digging deep.
Yeah, just a little bit. But when I first read it, I don't think I caught the Geldof reference or the Reganium, but I caught that. I was like, aww.
At least it's digging deep in 2017. Maybe when it came out. It would
Just a tad bit, yeah. Yeah, it's a little... I have to say, though, end of Chapter 11, and then we're going to jump right to that. The Doctor's thoughts while he's being strangled have to be my favorite scene in the whole book. And I have to find what I was talking about. When he's being strangled. The others got in my way just like you, Bennett growled, his eyes goggling with hysterical passion. Why do people always have to interfere? The Doctor wanted to reply that he had often asked himself exactly the same question.
Yes, I forgot about that, but I
Yes.
loved that line.
But he was unable to speak or even gasp, so tight was Bennett's crushing grip around his windpipe.
I would have gotten away with it if it wouldn't have been for meddling kids.
And
That's,
there's even a Scooby-Doo costume. The Coquillian costume is a Scooby-Doo
That's a
costume.
classic Scooby-Doo plot. The original Skeptic Show.
Yes,
It's
you al-
never demons or ghosts. It's
Yes.
always a real estate developer.
Yes, you almost expect the Doctor to pull off his mask and say, Professor Hyde White.
right. Yoink.
Yes, exactly. It's hilarious. Oh my god. There's so many joys in this book. It's just like amazing. It really is. Other things that stood out to you in this book? Things that you liked, things that you disliked? The fact that his description of the Didoan city sounds like something out of Skyrim with the Falmer cities. That was the first thing that came to my head. Those underground cities that the Falmers created.
It just made me really want to see them full of people.
Yeah,
Like, oh, what would this place be like if it was populated?
exactly.
Um,
Which you'll never see on a BBC budget in 1964.
I almost don't want to see it because, once again, the set in my mind is so fantastic.
Yeah, yeah. I think you might be offended by it.
I do have a profanity update, thanks to the magic of search. There are, I think, 2 to 4 hells and a couple of damns, but they are all uttered by the Secret Crew or Bennett.
Yes, and there's a goddamn in chapter 15, and that's the Secret Crew as well.
So, have your cake and eat it too. Only the bad guys use extremely mild profanity.
Oh, and there's something just to bear in mind about chapter 15. Remember how the TARDIS gets there. Because the Romans is going to start so cold that you will not know how it got there unless you've read this book.
Okay.
Possibly. I don't know. I may remind you of this, I don't know.
I'm just imagining Romans in the New Testament being a follow-up to this book. I'm like, that certainly is a bold direction to go in, isn't it?
There's also a drug reference right around that same point where blending you with science. And that's something unusual, too. That in a Hartnell book, we've got a drug reference, a drug usage reference, and that's so weird at the end of chapter 11, page 113. No, it's 111. Because I think part of what Bennett was doing had something to do... Yeah, Bennett stopped on the mission. 8 years cooped up with McQuaid. He was high.
I was a little surprised by that.
That is not in the televised version.
Deoxyphenyl sulfonates.
Yeah, thank you. I couldn't pronounce that. Yeah. Deoxyphenyl sulfonates. He was high. That's like, wow.
You have guests in for their expertise.
Yes, absolutely. There was back when original novels were being done, there was she still is a famous author. Her name is Kate Orman. And she said there are certain doctors that you cannot put in certain situations. For instance, it would make no sense to have the first Doctor in a cyberpunk novel.
No.
And I felt like saying, why not? That would be interesting. But that reference to drug references in a Hartnell novel almost strikes me as unusual. But it seems to work. So, other things that jumped out at you or you thought were odd?
I mean, they do have the stuff to establish that at least some of them are kind of dirtbaggish. If they're going to kill the aliens at the end.
Yes.
If they're going to kill the Adam and Eve.
Right. If they're going to retaliate.
They have to make them either stupid or calloused or evil in some way.
Yeah, and they have to have an American.
So they have to, of course, they had to have at least one American. To establish stupid and evil.
Yeah.
Apparently.
And they got it, yeah. He's not exactly Trumpian. It's a little early for that. But, yeah. I also found it interesting that they referred to... God, where is it? In which chapter? I think it was chapter 6. They referred to our Arenoculus friend?
I'm using a not very good PDF reader. Wouldn't allow me to copy and paste that and Google it because...
Yeah. And
I pride myself on having an excessively large vocabulary, and I am pretty sure I've never encountered that word before.
And I did look it up, and now I can't remember what I found, but I remember looking it up and thinking, oh my god, that's Marty's sense of humor coming in again. Because, of course, that's not in the original. Arenoculus. Where the hell did it come from? Oh, there it is. It's on page 68. I think that'll be 66 for y'all.
Would you?
The Doctor threw himself backward and collided with Ian, so they both fell in a struggling heap in the sand. Then they froze as a terrible, harsh screeching noise erupted outside. This is another of my favorite scenes. What is that? Ian whispered. It sounded like some sort of gun. No, I mean that horrible shrieking. They lay there listening to the agonized howls. I think it must be the end for our Arenoculus friend, the Doctor said quietly.
Yeah. Living, burrowing, or growing in sand.
Yes. Which is very apt.
Yes.
For a creature named Sandy.
The words that Lisa said, it's apt, I tell you. Apt!
Yes.
Exactly. But that's brilliant. It's like, did you hear that? What was that? Sound like a gun. No, it's a scream.
Are there that many creatures in the episodes?
Just that one. Yeah.
Not the worm and the ramp?
No, that's all new. That's all new. In fact, that's the thing that strikes me most as someone who's familiar with both the televised version and this version. There's so much new stuff here.
That was the only part where I thought it became tiresome.
Really?
Just the worm, the ramp. How long is this worm? How long is this burrow? How long is this ramp?
Yeah.
But, I mean, that's out of the entire book. Maybe there are 10 extra pages there. So that's still not bad.
Yeah. And I think that's because that's literal padding. That's Ian Marter saying, this is a two-parter, and the plot is as thin as a slice of government cheese. Let's see what we can do with it.
It's made of vegetable oil. It's not even a dairy product.
Exactly. How about you? Anything stood out for you?
I don't think anything that we haven't already discussed.
I thought he did a good job of communicating the scale of the deadness of the planet, the size of the wreck, the isolation of what seems to be the only two people there.
Yeah, it's quite astounding what Martyr does with so little, and especially when the poor man must have been suffering at the time that he was writing all this.
Yeah.
That's what gets me. That gets me a little bit of a lump in my throat, I have to admit. So, well, maybe we should do as we always do, which is go to Goodreads.com for online reviews of the book written by other readers, then follow up with our own ratings. By the way, if you're listening to this podcast, and I know at least 209 of you did to the last episode, and you want to have your review featured when we get to an upcoming book, simply read the book, write a review on Goodreads, and then write a comment somewhere so that we have a chance to see it before discussing the book ourselves. You may just get your review read out here.
Are we getting a sponsorship from Goodreads, or at least a fruit basket?
I have to talk to them. I really do, because they've gotten plenty of free press from us. The average rating for this story out of 5 stars is 3.34, which is lower than the last book.
Seriously?
Yeah. Here's some sample
I
reviews.
am indignant.
I'm a bit indignant, too. April, who gives it 5 stars, says, a really good retelling of the classic Who story. The audio book reader was great, so she listened to the audiobook version, which was probably William Russell, who played Ian. And it really helped flesh out the original story to have a bit more insight into each of the characters' thoughts and actions. The Doctor, Ian, and Barbara land in a strange cave on the planet Dido. The Doctor remembers the Dido natives as a completely peace-loving species, but it seems that one member of their race is holding 2 members of a crashed spaceship, the Astra 9, hostage nearby. Victoria and Bennett... Victoria? Yeah, she actually said Victoria.
Which is completely wrong.
It's a later companion, in fact.
Ew.
Yeah, there's Vicky and then there's Victoria, different Doctor. Are the only survivors of their crash ship and desperately await saving from the Seekers coming to rescue them. There's much of the usual running around confusion and a bit of Scooby-Doo style unmasking of the truth.
There you go.
But it really was an interesting story to listen to in this format. I will be seeking out other Ian Marter retellings, as it appears this was his final book before passing. Yes. Ian Hamilton gave it only 3 stars, saying, okay. He starts, okay. Probably worked better on screen, where it was the introduction of Vicky in the aftermath of Susan's departure. Suffers from the Agatha Christie curse, in that the mystery disappears quite readily if you just check everyone's story properly at the start. That said, and like Christie, Martyr's style is as much about the journey as the end result. That makes sense? Yeah. And finally, Sean LeBeau, whom we heard from last time, gives it 4 stars, saying, at first I thought Ian Marter was going to lead us on nothing but a journey of extended and philosophical descriptions of a desert landscape of Dido, obviously intent on trying to stretch a 2-episode throwaway story into a whole book. And I started thinking as well that maybe he should have just stuck to acting. Wow.
Me.
I know, but really... Well, it gets better. But
We
really...
don't speak ill of the dead, who will?
I know. But really, this book is a brilliant retelling of the serial, with added monsters, dangers, motivations, characterizations, and yes, descriptions that make reading this more worthwhile than watching the televised serial. Of course, this story introduces new companion Vicky, and she's a much fuller character in the book than she ever was on TV throughout her run. There's a lot here that reminds me of the 70s TV movie version of The Martian Chronicles. Yes. With the ghosts of the dead planet, a former thriving civilization disregarded and defiled by human arrogance and greed. An interesting twist in the book comes from the fact that the TARDIS may somehow have caused the original stream of events with its cross-materialization, maybe from the Doctor's first visit. At least that's how I see it. Interesting.
Yeah.
So, what do you think of the remark about the Vicky in the book being more interesting than the Vicky portrayed on the show.
I think that's a grave disservice to Maureen O'Brien, but I think it also says something about how paper-thin the characterization of Vicky is. Maureen O'Brien is just a fascinating individual. She's gone on to do much more acting beyond Doctor Who and to write novels of her own. She's actually better known as a murder mystery novelist in Britain, from what I understand. But that being said, yeah, there's not much to Vicky. There's not much here, and there's a lot more here than there is going to be in the televised version, and maybe even in the later novels. We'll have to see, obviously. Allison, you went last time with the stars. So how many stars out of 5 would you give
You always
this?
find me so harsh because once again, you tell me this is a scale of 0 to 5 for
But
like
it's not
all
applied
of
to
printed literature.
It's not applied to all of printed literature.
You said it was.
Okay, well, let's go with that then.
Okay, I think I went from a 1.5 on Planet of the Giant Dicks to the last one. I think it was a 2.
Might have been.
4. What was the title of the last book?
Dalek Invasion of Earth.
I would go a full 3.
Really?
Yeah, which is extremely high praise from me.
It is.
In spite of the weaknesses, I thought it was the most fun sci-fi thing that I had read in many years, mostly because I haven't read any sci-fi in many years. But
Okay.
I thought it was a perfect book to read in early June, like a great beach book that was at first I thought overly ornate in language, but then turned into a very nice, engrossing summer afternoons read.
Okay. All right.
And took a very thin story and did some very good evocative atmospheric things with it.
Yeah, it does that. Dalton?
Yeah, I agree. I probably hit right in the middle, like a 3.
There's a big difference between, hot damn, a 3, and Dalton's, a 3.
Well, because I'm not viewing this in all of literature. I'm viewing this as just me. Like, if I read something and it piques my interest enough, but it's not like the best thing I've ever read, yeah, it's a 3. It was interesting. I liked some of the characterizations. I'm interesting to see where things go with Vicky and how her relationships with Barbara and Ian and the Doctor, flourish or don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like we've said a lot. There's not a whole lot to go with. It was a 2-part episode, and so Ian Martyr kind of fleshed things out, added here and there, but yeah, it was a good read. It was a quick read. I read it this morning before work in about 2.5 hours. But most of these can be read fairly quickly. Like, this is like the 8th or 9th one that I've done, and most of them I've read in like one sitting.
Yeah.
And like you said, like, you can just sit in one afternoon, and if it's engrossing and it appeals to you, then you can get through it. And there have been very few of these that I have had trouble with.
The Romans might be a little slower read. In fact, I would suggest taking it
Start
as a slower
earlier.
read. Yeah, I would, because the Romans, I'm taking my time with it.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, okay. There's certain things I'm looking at, true.
Yeah.
But so you would give it a 3.
Yeah, I'm right in the middle, 3. It's
Okay.
pretty good.
I'm just going to reread Romans from the New Testament next time and play it straight the entire time that we all read the same thing. Like, in context of the series, it's pretty harsh
Right.
based on what came before, but it's nothing compared to what you're going to see in 1 Corinthians.
1 Corinthians.
Yes, just wait till that
Or
episode.
or what was it that Trump called it?
2 Corinthians 2 or 2 Corinthians.
2 Corinthians, yeah.
Your turn.
I may shock people a little bit here. I would give this a 4.25 out of 5,
Well,
and
to
I'm
the big
not.
spenders.
Well, I'm not comparing it to all of literature. I'm comparing it to the other Doctor Who books, and Dalek Invasion of Earth. I think I gave that one a 4 because it's decent and it's Dix at his best, which is expanding. But Dix at his best is nothing compared to Ian Martyr at his best, and I think this is Ian Martyr at his best. I didn't ask you how you felt this compared to Reign of Terror, but I would say this is the better book of the two. How do you feel about that?
Being a little bit of a history, I wouldn't say fanatic, but having known history, reading Reign of Terror was a little more interesting for me. But no, this is not a bad book at all.
Yeah.
I feel like, some of the passages and the descriptions were probably better than Reign of Terror. There was a lot I feel like Reign of Terror had more to go with.
Yeah.
So that's why it feels like it's more interesting to me.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
this isn't a bad book.
No, and I think it's an excellent book. Even though I have more trouble now with the prologue and the epilogue than I did when I was 17 and first read it.
Yeah.
I really appreciate all the effort that went into it, especially knowing what Martyr was probably going through in his personal life at the time that he was writing this, because, damn, this is so much a better story on the page than it is on screen. There's nothing necessarily wrong with putting on the rescue and doing some knitting, having it in the background, because it's that sort of story. You don't have to pay a lot of attention to it. You look up for a moment when Barbara kills Sandy just to laugh at the gun falling apart, and then looking at this poor actor in this costume going, ah, whop, whop, in a very Pac-Man type style. But yeah, whereas this feels much less like a means to introduce a character and more like a self-realized story.
Yeah.
And it's one of those few books in the Target range, at least so far, where the writer has really improved upon what's there on the screen. So, yeah, 4.5.
And you said the prologue and the epilogue were written by Nigel Robinson?
No, the prologue was written by him. The
epilogue was written by someone else.
Epilogue was written by Robinson, though that last chapter with the rescue ship was still written by Ian Marter.
Yeah.
It's just Robinson who tacked on the epilogue where the Diodoi get killed.
Yes.
So do you think that Martyr intended to euthanize the entire species?
He might have done. He might have. In fact, I would really love to at some point write to Nigel Robinson for the first time in 25 years since I wrote him that letter when I was a kid and say, were you going from his notes, or did you just decide to put this terribly bleak ending on of your own volition? Because, and I think there's an interesting question to be asked there, because if that was Ian Marter's intent, it does kind of fit the rest of the book. There's a bleakness.
Yeah.
There is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The whole thing.
Yeah.
It's kind of that way.
The two-parter is so forgettable. This book, there's nothing forgettable about it.
But in the end, like, even though all of the natives have been killed, the fact that they have saved Vicky is like that redemption moment of like, all right, well, we saved her at least.
Right. But then you have to wonder if he caused it in the first place.
Oh, yeah. Well, that opens up even more questions.
Yeah, which will never be resolved, but that's fine. That's the wonder and joy that is Doctor Who, all the unanswered questions.
I thought that the three-dimensional electronic crossword puzzle was a really nice throwaway gag.
Yeah.
Porcine, that's it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's totally
And being
Martyr.
scrambled by the TARDIS.
Yeah.
There were some very good, like I said, beach book details like that made it, I thought, much more recreationally enjoyable than the last two.
Yeah, understandably. Of the two writers, I would say, even though Dix has done more, Martyr definitely shines a lot more. Yeah, I know. Dix do more. Oh, God. All right, well, thanks, guys. And thank you, fellow time travelers, for giving us your valuable time. Next time we go back to Roman times with the appropriately named novelization, The Romans. In the meantime, if you've liked what you've heard here, like us on Facebook at Doctor Who Target Book Club Podcast, all one word with no spaces. You could also visit our subreddit at www.reddit.com/r/DW Target BC. If you add a comment on Facebook or a subreddit or even on SoundCloud or one of our other podcast platforms, anywhere.
Text us.
Yes, do something. Call me.
Dalton's
God,
home address is.
I'm so desperate. If you think there's something we missed here, or you just want to tell us you like us in words, you'll be entered in our next Target book giveaway. And we're still trying to give away that same sorry copy of the War Games. Maybe it's a different book. If you want a different book, tell me. Email me. Tell me.
Comment saying I would much rather have this book instead.
You're going to become like
Yes.
the Tenacious D song where they stalk their one fan.
Yes, it may just be that. Also, feel free to watch our videos and give us a thumbs up or comment on YouTube at www.youtube.com/user/Emperor Dalek/videos. Follow us on Twitter. We're at DW Target BC. or subscribe to us via the podcaster provider of your choice. We are on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, TuneIn, and intermittently on Podbean. If all else fails you, email us at dwtargetbc@gmail.com. Thank you very much for listening, and enjoy your travels. Bye-bye.
Bye. They said something on there about Codfest. I'm like, when does Codfest start? When are we going? It sounds delicious.
Codfest. Ooh, it does sound delicious, doesn't it?
Codfest.